So it is 5:32, if we're all set. Call this meeting to order. And do you have any adjustments to the agenda, Karen?
I do not, Josh.
Okay. I know that Swift was hoping to do equity and inclusion charges a little earlier than we are because she has to leave on the early side. So
I thought of that. Do you want to move that?
I know that we have. Let's put it maybe after.
Hounding?
Yeah, exactly, somewhere in there.
Where?
And after Hounding, we'll change it from G to we'll swap G to position C.
Thank you.
Endorse that word.
And then go from there. All right, so approve.
Thank you.
Yeah. Approval of minutes. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of June 16th, 2021, regular and special meeting.
And I second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve both the minutes from both the special meeting and the regular meeting from June 16th, 2021. Is there any discussion? If not, then all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, so thank you. Public comment on items not on the agenda. Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman, yesterday and the day before yesterday, I noticed a public safety issue that I'd like to bring to the attention of the select board. During the weekend of June 26th to 27th, 2021, signs were duly posted on dead-end Home Depot Road. Quote, road closed at 6:28, 8 a.m., unquote, for new town water and sewer connections. June 29th, circa 7:40 a.m., these signs were gone. When I walked by again, circa 8:40 a.m., dead-end Old Depot Road was again closed and blocked by a full-width trench. It appears that residents and others were not notified of this second planned closure. What if an ambulance, EMT vehicle, fire engine, or police cruiser had needed emergency access during these planned closures of dead-end Old Depot Road? A steel plate could have been ready to slide over the open trench to reopen one lane, but there was none. In the event that emergency vehicles were denied access, contractor and town doubtless would be liable for simple negligence, if not criminal negligence. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. I don't know, is there used to be dual access onto the other end through Newman Lane, but no, there's no access through there?
No.
Okay.
So if I may.
Yes.
The reality is with that, just like any other time we have a closure in town, whether it's the highway department doing the work, a private contractor, it doesn't matter who it is. It's all set up. We have their phone numbers. The steel plate was there to put over the road. They can fill the ditch back in quick. All it is a phone call to them. So June and Rick knew if we had something over there, I was going to give them a phone call. They opened the road and we're good.
Okay. But
So yeah, and I spoke to Brian about it.
Yeah.
And he did immediately go down there and assess the situation, but you know, the tractors were there. It was a tight one lane.
Yeah.
But you know, an 8-foot fire truck would have been able to get through
if
there.
necessary.
Yes.
Okay.
And the steel plate was there.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Regarding the former entry to what is now Putney Landing.
Yeah.
The lane is still there as a pedestrian way.
Right.
And because there are sprinkler accesses to the two buildings that are nearest to it, I suspect it's also a fire lane. But it dead ends just before the buildings. There's no way to drive anything beyond there because of buildings and playground and benches and all sorts of things. I took a close look at that.
Yeah. Okay. Is that your access to sprinkler hookups?
No, not our initial, not direct. That access, we asked for that to be included in the project strictly for one building.
Yeah.
So we could get to the rear of it.
Yeah.
If we needed to get more equipment in there to the rear of that building, we could.
Okay.
That's all.
All right, so it sounds like your concerns were noted and addressed, and they were prepared for that. It may not have appeared that way, but hopefully it would have.
Yes, I wanted to bring it to your attention as you govern the town between town meetings in case anything needed to be done, because otherwise it could have been a bad situation.
A liability, definitely. Yeah. All right. Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Karen.
Can we step back one and do the warrants?
Oh, yes, we can do that.
I'll make a motion to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants to the treasurer as presented upon completion of review. So why don't we go ahead and review them? So Karen, if you want to do the payroll first.
Payroll dated July 2nd, 2021 in the amount of $17,496.97. It looks small. I'm hoping next payroll warrant we'll see lifeguards on here.
Yep, good.
So,
Has there been any luck recruiting anybody?
I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Let's not get sidetracked.
I already tried to jump ahead. Don't confuse.
It's a good sign. We like that, Josh.
All right. So AP warrant.
EP warrant dated June 19th through June 30, 2021 in the amount of $134,760.83. And I will remind the select board that this is the last warrant for the fiscal year. David, if you want to take a look at these.
Women leading government. That was a training you went to. Is that correct?
It's a membership that I'm in.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
What's the firematic stuff, Tom?
Firematic.
3,726.50.
Yeah, those are for new nozzles that we've ordered, and it's actually it goes against our grant, our equipment grant.
Good. Okay. Innovative municipal products, $3,900.
That sounds like chloride.
Yep.
DB Environmental Consulting.
TV. Oh, that was for
TV.
pulling the underground storage tank.
Oh, okay. So is that out?
That's out. Actually, all of them are gone now, both here and at the highway department. Yeah.
And no issues with either of them?
Absolutely none, fortunately.
That's nice, yeah.
And they deal with the tank for us. They took the tank away?
No, all the tanks are being stored over at the highway garage.
Got it. Okay.
David Bach, the engineer, he knows that. He's recorded all of that.
Okay.
So that invoice was for here for all of his documentation, site work, which was collecting soil samples. And then there'll be Brian will submit it. There'll be another invoice from him for the work at the highway garage.
Okay.
Just so you know, to this warrant, so there are payments on there for next year that needed to be paid now. And they'll be charged to the next fiscal year, but they're just showing up here.
Sounds good. Anything else? All right. So it has been moved and seconded to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon completion of review. We have completed review and
You could have held on.
That's okay.
So unless there's any further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You can be signing those warrants right now, Josh, if you'd like.
Wow.
Wow.
And the minutes.
What do you know?
And the
Oh,
minutes.
yeah, these are, the minutes would be.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow, you're really trying to.
Confuse you.
How long's it been? Yeah, how many months?
It's been over a
This, I
year.
mean, this is the first time I've got
Yeah.
to sign it.
You're,
It's official, I mean.
May I ask the town manager a question?
yes,
Thank you. I realize that I don't know, are we cash or accrual accounting here?
We are, accrual. Right?
yeah.
Yes, yeah, because we, yeah, it's not cash. No,
Basically under generally accepted accounting principles, one or the other.
right.
So we're accrual. Thanks, I realize I never knew this.
Yep.
Okay. So back to public comments on items not on the agenda. We covered that once, but just drop back since we're there again. So I don't think we have any. Don't see anything in the chat. So town manager.
So quickly, goal status. So the shell has been completed. The contractor will be back tomorrow. There was one section on the ramp. He was waiting on fiberglass. It did not come in, but it's not compromised enough that he's worried about it, but he's gonna come back in the fall.
Okay.
And it's probably, I'd say at least 4 feet, from the top down. But the bottom where it was really bad, he's stabilized that
Mhm.
quite a bit, so he's not worried about it. We got the light bulb, that's gonna go in tomorrow. The suction covers that were vandalized,
Mm-hmm.
so those have been replaced. Those, one's on now, the other one's gonna go on tomorrow. Joe will be at the pool tomorrow. They're gonna pump from the brook, and it should take a day.
So he's done the gel coat and everything?
So,
Yes,
Wow, cool.
yep, so it's all painted. He's got the black lines on the seams.
Mhm.
He's got the numbering all up. It looks really nice.
It just came from there. They
Yeah.
got a little bit of masking tape now where the colors changed from the dark blue on the ramp to the light blue on the sides, but
Yeah.
boy, it looks beautiful.
Yep.
It came out really nice.
It's been really humid, as everyone's known. And they struggled in the heat,
Mhm.
so they had shorter days.
Yeah.
But the weather, cooperated. And Alyssa was in there. She painted, she stripped both girls' and boys' rooms, the floors, cleaned
Wow.
and repainted.
Wow.
And of course, the humidity on the floors, because it's concrete.
Yeah.
Joe had to shut the water off up there because the toilets were sweating
Mhm.
and the paint wasn't drying.
Yeah.
So she did a really good job, and between that and the office work, she put in quite a bit of work. Beverly
Thank
was
you.
up there today with a
Mhm.
couple guards. They were cleaning that middle room.
Mm-hmm.
We're not able to paint that. It was just the schedule's too tight.
Right.
So once the water gets into the pool, Joe can fire up the pump house.
Sounds good.
So we were looking to get another pump. One of the pumps there was a problem with. Did he get another pump?
Yeah, the pump is up there.
Okay.
I'll see if he replaced it or not.
Okay.
But, the pool hasn't been started in over a year, so I'm hoping that things will run smoothly.
Good.
Come fall, I think we really need to reconsider how we're gonna approach the pool,
Mm-hmm.
so we can maintain it, staff it with appropriate people.
Yep.
And a number of people. As everyone knows, we got the grant this year, so it's free swim. The camps have already been calling because they want, the camp kids to be at the pool. We have probably a half dozen lifeguards right now.
Nice.
Some are part-time. We're still looking for lifeguards. So we're gonna keep soliciting.
Good.
And if anybody has, and it doesn't even have to be like a teenager, it could be, a young adult. But we definitely need lifeguards, and that is the situation too, shortage in all towns right now.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at with that.
Nice.
Well, before you only had 2 online, and now you say you've got 6, so that's an improvement.
Yeah,
So,
we've been beating the bushes, and I sent letters out to everybody that was a guard like 2 years ago. I said, if you got a friend, send him over here. It's like,
thank you, and thank Alyssa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah.
Yep.
So our target date is still Saturday, July 3rd. Joe will be able to put chemicals in the pool too, and it's not going to take much because he's dragging it right out of the brook, which is fairly clean. So,
Good.
Nice.
Paving status on Hickory Ridge Road. Anybody traveling through there, it is complete.
Yeah.
I'll have to send the deputy sheriff up there and see. It is pretty smooth. I was up there.
Don't send them up
Yeah.
too soon. It's really
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Is it gonna get lined?
I'm not sure about that. I would.
They-
Was
I
it
would
like
think a
before?
center line.
You think probably, and I think the road crew, Brian must have a little bit of sure packing to do off the edge where it drops off
They already-
after a while.
They did most of it today.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Because I thought they were going to let it cure for a little bit longer, but it looks like there might be some more spots to do, but maybe they started and didn't finish.
Yeah.
But it came
Yes.
out beautiful.
It's still a little soft right now, but
Yeah. Man, those poor guys, those
Yeah.
poor people doing that in that weather. Oof,
there was a comment
brutal.
too that someone spotted our guys doing traffic control,
Mhm.
and I think it was Tuesday.
Yeah.
Basin they contracted out for the traffic control, but that company didn't send their guys because it was so hot.
Oh.
So our guys were up there. There were
Yeah.
4 guys up there with
Just to
two
keep
pieces.
it moving along.
Yeah,
Yeah.
2 pieces of equipment. They were taking breaks, and
I was really impressed with the quality of the work they did underneath the pavement.
Yeah.
They did a
Yeah.
really nice job
Yeah.
packing and
Yeah.
wetting
Yeah.
and compacting and really getting that smooth. And
Yeah.
the work Brian did, drainage
Right.
on the
Yeah.
west side of the hill as you first come onto Hickory Ridge Road there.
Yeah.
And looks like that will improve for the future. Improve that.
so I'll ask Brian about the lining.
Well, they'll have to
I
put,
think,
they'll have to do school.
right,
They'll have to paint for
yeah.
school crossing.
And I know on his schedule is doing all the parking lines and crosswalks like they normally do every year. So I don't know where that is on his schedule.
Yeah.
So, so tax rate status in 2021 tax billing. I was hoping today or maybe tomorrow we might have an official educational tax rate. So our first billing is August 20th. That's when the first tax bill will be due. So we have 30 days prior to get tax bills out to people. So like July 20th.
Okay.
I don't really want to wait that long if I have
No,
the tax
I
rate. Although
Our next meeting is.
the 14th. So I think at that meeting, Eileen,
Mhm.
I'll make the announcement.
Hopefully.
And then we'll have, you already voted on the municipal tax. You'll have the education tax, but I think we should just revisit that and have the whole picture. Fiscal year 2021 audit startup. It started. Alyssa's like, yeah, we've got the contract. We're pulling things together. We upload most of it.
Yeah.
So and they want things by a certain date. And so we're in the crux of things right now.
What does that normally do?
Well, the first batch of stuff, I think it was July 12th.
Oh, wow.
Might have been later than that, but with everything going on right now, trying to get the pool up and running. but we're managing.
I think Ann has a question.
I do.
Oh.
I'm also fully vaccinated.
So you don't have to wear your
I don't
mask if
have
you don't
to,
want
but I'm
to.
sort of in the library mode.
Oh, there you go.
I was just curious, in the last two reports at town meeting, the town report, the statement for the water system showed that there was no indication that the bond had been paid for the system. That's the second year in a row that's happened.
Yeah.
Do you know why that doesn't show up as paid? We've got the money.
No, it's been paid and it shows up in a different place.
Oh, not
Yeah.
within the water system report?
Yeah, it's just an odd thing, and we just, Alyssa and I go back and forth, and it's like, Chip, why is this happening, you know, it's like, so, but
It's very helpful to have all the water system, there's a line item for it, and it's just blank. So I just sit there and say, well, it didn't get paid, how is that?
No, don't worry, we would have known it, we weren't
Well, one
paid,
would
but.
think, but
Does it have something to
We
do
never
with when
discussed
bills go out? And because
No,
they go out so
because-
late, or it's just
No.
listed in a different place?
No, because so the bond payment is the actual payment, and on the line item, it doesn't show in there,
Okay.
it shows up top.
Ah,
So there's an adjustment at the end of the year.
Mhm.
It's municipal accounting. It's,
So,
Explain it to me.
well, I can't,
yeah.
she can.
And I don't have it in front of me, so I can't.
Okay.
so
As long as it's
maybe
paid, that's my
next year we can put an asterisk there or something
Yeah,
and
well,
say,
then
Point us to the right
refer to
direction,
page,
the right line
Yeah.
item.
sure.
That would
Yeah.
be great.
That it?
That was just it, I was just curious.
Okay, sounds good.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
just a clarification, fiscal year 2021, does that refer to the year that began July 1st, 2020, or not?
Correct, that would be 2021.
Right,
Yeah,
Thank you.
because we're gonna.
sorry, to be clear, 2020 and 2021, those two that's that fiscal year.
So fiscal year starts July 1st.
Thank you. The reason I ask that is because in corporate annual reports, it sometimes is stated the other way, so.
Right.
We stated the year it ends, not the year it starts.
Yeah,
It's the year, so it ends in 21, so that's fiscal year 21, isn't that right?
yes,
Yep.
yes. Yep, it's very confusing, Howard.
Not really, it's just to one standard or another.
Yes, one
Yeah,
way.
you try closing out a year, starting a year, and then you're trying to budget for the next year.
21, 22. And pretty soon we'll be starting on 23. So,
We are.
yeah. All right. So you're all set? Town
Yes,
manager
I am.
report? Okay,
Thank
good. So next on our select board items for discussion and action, lister appointment of Susan Hessey. Susan is here. Thank you for being here, Susan. And Geordie, Susan, I know, wrote a letter of
An email. Yeah.
interest, or interest or willingness at least. And Geordie, do you wanna comment at all?
Sure. Since Eileen decided to run for select board, we have been actively seeking a third member for our lister board. And when we talked to Susan last week, finally found somebody who was ready and willing. And Doug and I spent some time with her, and seems like it should be a very good fit, that she'll be able certainly to do what we do and do it well and find it interesting and challenging, and that we should work well together. And Doug is certainly hoping that you, as a select board, appoint her tonight, because she's ready to start work tomorrow.
Nice. Well,
Hallelujah.
at any time, yeah.
Well, I know Susan, not all that well, but well enough to know that I think she will be a good choice for that position. Good people skills, good all sorts of various skills. So I would imagine you will, that would be good. So I would definitely entertain a motion to approve the recommendation to appoint Susan Hessey as a lister.
So moved.
I'll second.
Good, it's been moved and seconded. Do you want to comment, Susan? You don't need to, but if you want to, you're welcome to, or?
I appreciate the opportunity to participate this way in the town I love so much.
Good.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed spending time with Doug and Geordie, and I have a lot to learn, but I think they can teach me, and it's going to be interesting and fun, and I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Good, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Welcome
And I
to
think
Lister
you'll,
World.
I think you'll enjoy it.
Welcome to Lister World.
Thank you so much.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded, and if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
I
Fairman.
waited until the vote because I didn't want this question to be apropos of Ms. Hessey, but I was thinking in general, I know that VLCT offers training for select boards.
Yes,
Do they also offer training for listers?
Oh, yes.
definitely, lots of it.
VLCT
Yeah.
and also PPR.
Hmm.
And they're very good trainings. They usually happen in the springtime, which is unfortunate because that's when all the listers are busy. But
Right.
they're really excellent trainings, and definitely should take some of them.
And sort of ongoing tier, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there, you can learn more about being a lister than you might have ever imagined. But more is merrier, I think, for the most part.
Yeah,
because,
no, yeah, it's
It's useful stuff.
yeah.
Good, thank you. Hounding on Putney Mountain response. So, is Ellen with us? It doesn't look like
Ellen's out
it.
of town.
Ellen's out of town, okay. So,
I'm sorry, go ahead. Tom.
yeah, no, go ahead, David.
It's supposed, our comments or their feelings on this need to be in by the 5th, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So
We
we're,
don't have very much time. We need to do something now.
yes.
Yes.
So,
Was this supposed to be a resolution that we could vote on?
So there was some talk about that. I read through this and thought that it was, I mean, they're asking for comments, so if it was in the form of a letter, I don't see why that would be a problem.
Okay.
So I think this format's fine.
The only reason I ask is I thought we left it like that, so I didn't know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's some talk about it.
yeah, I'm not sure I would tend to agree that I'm not sure it matters, as long as it's sort of,
Signed by the board?
well, and clear the intent
Right.
Yeah.
is to express this. So,
And being on Putney letterhead would
right.
This would be
be appropriate.
Yeah, it was Christine Couturier and Ellen and I sort of worked together. Ellen was the one who pulled the ultimate proposed letter for you. Together gave it to Karen for her comments and revisions. And this is where we're at.
Good. Okay.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, no, good, this is Laura Campbell. This is a matter of some concern to me, and you're mentioning that someone is missing. Is that Ellen or Alan? And
Ellen Holmes is the secretary of the Conservation Commission.
Ellen who?
Holmes, Holmes.
Thank you. And to whom are the comments to be directed,
The U.S.
or to what organization?
It's the
United States Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife Service, I believe.
Thank you.
So,
So the main piece to this, or the, where did it go? Or is it still?
There's a background.
Okay, we have two pieces of paper here. Are
Right.
they both the same?
No,
There-
one is
No,
the
they're
background.
Okay, oh, I see, okay. So there was something in here that the select board included a request that we promulgate a special regulation. Is that the crux of the letter that we?
Having read through the proposal it's a proposal that affects all of the 2 Vermont pieces of land. One is a division, which is very large up in the Northeast Kingdom.
Yeah.
The other is us, 285 acres down here.
Right.
And some land in New Hampshire to open to hunting. Under those circumstances, they let the state hunting rules regulate usually.
Okay.
They do have some of their own rules. For instance, they don't allow hunting at night. And that's somewhat different than for some animals under Vermont Fish and Wildlife. But they also do have special regulations for particular units or divisions that they own. And it seems to me the best way to approach this is to ask them, in regard to opening the Silvio Conte to hunting, that hounding not be allowed.
Okay.
Because of the problems with safety. It's just such a small unit. It's so, I mean, if hounds were loosed on Bennett, these guys, whoever the hunters are in a truck with the hounds in the back. They generally access land via public roads, and they release the hounds from the road once the hounds seem to have picked up a scent. And they pretty much stay in the truck. The hounds are radio collared. They have ways of tracking them. They can also see on their smartphones exactly where their hounds are.
Yeah.
They don't get out until the hounds stop. They don't know exactly why. They may have stopped, whether they've killed the animal, whether it's treed, what's going on. And then when the hounds have stopped, I believe they get out and walk to where they are. So, and up to 6 hounds can be released once the owners of the hounds believe they've picked up a scent that would be interesting, like a bear, bobcat, fox, whatever. And so these hounds are on their own. They're trained, but on their own.
They're still on their own.
So my question is, it says the Putney Conservation Commission and private land abutters to the refuge have drafted a letter for your review attached, which is below and attached. Is that this? Or is that something separate that I don't have?
No, it's just
It's just this piece.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something I was missing. And
So that's one type of thing we would not want to see. I mean, if they were released on Bennett Road,
no,
it's ridiculous.
I get it.
It's up to 40 homes that are within a 1 mile radius.
And can you explain your map?
Oh, do they have my map?
Yes, they have your map.
My lovely little map of dots. John and I tried to come up with a more professional looking map, but this just sort of explains. The yellow is the Silvio Conte Wildlife Refuge. It runs into Brookline. If I were going to release hounds, I would probably do it on Bennett Road in Brookline, if you're interested.
Thank you.
And at Parkman Wood, they say access to refuge hunting land would be from public roads and adjoining public lands and water. So they could access through the blue, which is Putney Mountain Association land, which has. That particular area has a loop trail that runs through the whole blue area coming down. They have trails through the refuge. So these hounds are going to cross at least 1 or 2 popular hiking trails. And they're going to be within range of lots of houses. If you're up on Putney Mountain Road and released with that brown dot, then you are so close to Brookline and it's all downhill. And you're about a little over a mile from the trailhead and the parking on the town forest for the Putney Mountain Trail system. The thing's nuts. And I don't believe anybody running hounds would even try coming here, but I think we better make sure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, one would assume this would not be the best place to release hounds anyway, but.
Yeah. And how we in general feel about this particular practice, we won't go there because it's just so clearly on this 285 acre part of a major trail system in one of Putney's most beloved tourist attractions and popular places to hike with kids, with dogs. No way.
So if the letter is due by July 5th,
Yes.
when would we have an answer whether or not it would happen?
They're gonna collect all of the comments, and then I don't know what their schedule is for making a final decision. It affects not only us down here, it affects 26,000 acres in the Northeast Kingdom. It affects probably 3 or 4 big land holdings in New Hampshire. So I don't think it's gonna be real quick.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be open to hunting until, they took some kind of action. But we're saying, if you do open this up to hunting, then we want this one particular type of hunting not allowed, which is allowed under Vermont Fish and Wildlife Regs.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
would anyone know whether the hunters are represented by any organization?
Yes, they are.
What's the name of the organization?
Off the top of my head, it's in the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Regulations. I think it's the Vermont Houndsman Association or something like that.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Basically, it was to confirm that there is an organization, and now I know Houndsman is in the name, so.
Yeah, I think
Easy
it's
enough to
Vermont
find.
Houndsman, and then Association maybe.
You see, this, however, does raise a question that I find of interest. There is a Vermont Houndsman Association. Earlier, I understood that we were talking about people coming from out of state, because if I understood correctly in a previous meeting, what they want to do was not allowed there, so they come up here. But it appears that it's now also done in Vermont. So I'm wondering what the state of Vermont has to say about this. Or I should say, what say does the state of Vermont have to say?
Well, people would come here because more and more states are not allowing it.
Precisely.
And so they're coming here. The only thing that they said to me about this particular section of the Silvio Conte Wildlife Refuge was that they didn't believe any huntsman has ever or would come to hunt in such a small space. But how they feel about hunting with the hounds, they're not saying anything about that. It's been done for years and years and years in Vermont. And I don't think there's any big movement underway except perhaps Protect Our Wildlife, which is a nonprofit group, is working on this issue, and also the issue of the 365 days a year, around the clock hunting of coyotes as if they were vermin, which is in my list of things. I would love to see a Massachusetts style hunting season at least.
So I have a question. I thought this was open to hunting now. It is, isn't it? I think it is.
All of the Putney Mountain Association land is open to hunting. And one of the people who manages this area, according to Kath Abbott, who I talked to, who's with the Putney Mountain Association, she said she talked to the manager of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and they sort of think it's open to hunting already. So why they're doing this?
When I went online and I read it, it said it was open, subject to all the laws of the state.
Yeah.
Hunting, right. So
this proposal is very specific. So they must be updating their plan. It says it's their plan, recreational and hunting and fishing plan for New Hampshire and Vermont draft.
Huh.
It may be an update of an existing plan. But yes, you're right. There's a confusion about that.
Right, and we're not opposed to hunting. We're opposed to hounding.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
That's what the letter says.
Yep.
So I guess one, I don't know whether this is in your item number 4, it says the town of Putney opposes new guidelines around hunting with hounds. I think it should probably read the select board of the town of Putney if we're going to vote on it.
That sounds good.
Because
We're perfectly open to editing anything you want to do.
And therefore, the select board of the town of Putney requests that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service promulgate a special regulation.
That sounds better to me.
Also, just one typo in item 1, trails from the summit to the Silvio Conte Refuge and to Holland, it says Holland Road,
Oh, right.
Holland Hill Road, continue to be popular.
Karen, can you make
Yes.
motions, because I usually don't.
So, the question is how to word a motion on this. I think that it would probably be, I would entertain a motion to recognize the concerns of the individuals who have written this letter to the Putney Select Board and adopt this letter as a statement from the board to express our concern about hounding on this piece of property.
So moved. Beautiful. Good. I couldn't say any better.
I
Does
hope
that-
Melissa got that.
Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded to recognize the concerns and adopt this letter in order to express the select board shared concern about hounding on the Silvio Conte National Fish and Wildlife Refuge section on Putney Mountain. And is there any further discussion?
Can I make one correction?
Yes.
So Christine in the chat had mentioned that because of the holiday on Monday, so the deadline is actually July 6th.
Okay. Good.
So I also assume that once we vote on this, you're gonna put it on letterhead, we should come in and sign at some point, right?
Or I could do electronic if that's what you prefer.
Either way.
I'm fine either way.
Because we're emailing the letter, is that my understanding?
I assumed, I believe the comments are being submitted via email.
That's what I
Okay.
thought.
If they
Okay,
do on the 6th, it would sort of,
so we'll do electronic signatures.
okay.
And I'll clean this up.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I would ask for a friendly amendment addition to that, to also accept the Putney Conservation Commission recommendation to copy Congressman Welch and Senators Leahy and Sanders.
Okay.
Accept that.
That's okay.
Okay. Yep.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded, and if there's no further discussion, sorry. Turn that off. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right, so,
Josh,
yes,
who did you say to send a copy to?
to Congressman Welch and
Sanders.
Senators Sanders and Leahy.
Thank you.
You've heard of them before?
I have.
Good, thank you. All right, let's see. So next on our agenda, so we were going to switch now. So we've done hounding, so we're going to switch to equity and inclusion charges. So I need,
You have a copy in your packet.
yeah, no, I know. I know, sorry, I didn't mean to say I need.
That's
I meant to say I know. I know David had just taken some notes on it and
David, that's your original.
Got it, thanks.
You're
Yep.
welcome.
let's see, so it's going to be further back because we're jumping around.
It's like at the very end.
It's
Yeah,
at the very end.
okay. So, you had a couple questions / concerns, David.
My first most important question is on item number 6, to create an equity impact assessment tool. What is an equity impact assessment tool? What is that? What would that look like?
Swift, do you want to answer that or do you want me
Speak to
to?
that. Sure. This is a suggestion that came from Matan. Honey, I can't let you in right now. Sorry, I'm on a meeting. And there is a sample that's used from the state and a lot of other state agencies. It's basically a way, like a checklist of like, okay, checking your language, checking economic disparities. It might be addressed or not addressed. Like it might be something that water would use, sewer would use, any committee would use to kind of just check any new motions of like going through this filter of, we're looking through this lens of diversity and equity in all of our systems. And I can try and find the link that Atan shared with the subcommittee, and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
But we have an example to work off of that, and Atan seemed like it was definitely a big proponent of this sort of filter of all of our actions and choices to be going through this sort of tool to evaluate and search for equity.
Excellent. Thank you.
I think I would add to that just that, as Swift said, Etan had provided us with a copy of what the state uses. That's probably more complicated than we want or need. So I think the fact to create an equity impact assessment tool is really, the intent is to come up with something that's thorough but also manageable. I mean, if we adopted the state one, it's way more complex than we need. So
modify, basically.
Exactly. Take the intent of it and modify it in order to be appropriate for us.
So number 9, to provide resources and advocacy for confronting bias-motivated incidents. So advocacy, the definition of say it, David, advocacy. And this is a committee under the purview of the select board. Do they get to advocate for anybody, for us? And what's the definition of that word there? That popped up and it made me wonder. So
I can share what we were thinking and what that meant, and it's some of what the committee has already been doing, and that was the language that came from it. And that was when some people in the town have had issues or concerns around equity or inclusion, they've been directed to this committee. When there was concerns with the way people were feeling about the damage done to the mural, they were directed to this committee. And what happened was some advocacy. One of our meetings, we opened it up and invited the sheriff to come and speak to what was going on directly, and having conversations with them about resources or things that they could do in response to how they were feeling or what was going on. That could be connecting them with the bias reporting in the state of Vermont. That could be connecting them to a local organization, or the readiness response team. It's sort of being this connector of resources that are accessible, not necessarily being the ones on the ground that are doing the work, but being an advocate, being sort of the like, here's what's out there, here's the deck of cards of things that might help you with what's going on. Happy to come to a select board meeting with you. If you want, like, if there's a concern you're having that you want to bring to the select board or whatever, like, this piece of just being that sort of bridge between a need and an action.
Okay,
So-
But not necessarily the action.
I understand your concerns. If we change that word from advocacy to conduit or connection, would that make it better?
something.
Or perhaps, because I think the intent was mostly to provide resources for people who were seeking advocacy, and the committee would be that advocate sometimes, but more it was to direct people to the right place. So I would suggest perhaps to provide resources and avenues of advocacy for confronting, or something along those lines, Swift. So basically being what we talked about was like having information available that could be provided. If somebody came forward and said, this happened to me, what do I do? Being able to say, these are the resources that are available to you. If you need an advocate, our most sort of basic example for us would be the EAP, the Employees Assistance Program. But who are the people around, either locally or statewide, that do this? So it's really to be able to provide, it's a sort of a different version of providing resources.
But there's a difference between providing information where they can get someone to advocate for them and having this committee be the advocate for them, which I think is flirting with a situation we dealt with before that could have been problematic. And I was wondering about the language.
Yeah, I hear that concern. There is a need, I think, that and this committee has addressed it and it has been used by the public of being that sort of support system, not necessarily being the one that's doing it for you, but creating and supporting you in getting that done. And be like, I think there are people that might have concerns or incidents that have happened and that the committee might be open to like, oh, if you want to go to a select meeting, I'll make sure I'm there with you. Like, I'm not going to speak for you. I'm not going to do the work of it. But the piece of, I guess maybe it's ally, like then advocacy versus like ally.
Even that's different. Advocate to me speaks of in a legal way that I don't think this committee has the power to act
or the training
right. And so I'm just concerned about the language. I'm not concerned about what you want to do. I agree with what you want.
Maybe I'd like to put allyship in there or something like that.
Okay.
Or maybe something. Yeah. I like that word.
Okay. And then.
I'm out of view.
Yeah.
Be allies?
Yeah, be allies or something. Yeah, I mean.
Or confronting that. I think that sounds great. So to provide resources and be allies for confronting bias. Yeah, and then there was something else you said, Eileen, you had some language in there that you said earlier.
Assist?
I did.
Assist?
Assist, maybe it was assist or compile. I don't know. That feels like
be a conduit.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
I think allyship covers it. That feels light. I like that. To provide resources and allyship for confronting bias made it. I like.
Okay.
If you like that.
So my next concern is pretty much answered now because what we just talked about advocacy, but under 12, to facilitate interactions between all Putney organizations and businesses regarding their work on equity, inclusion, and diversity. So definition of facilitate.
What we were imagining was that there would be maybe one meeting a quarter or something like that would be open to, I mean, they're all open to the public, but would be specifically for an organization presenting their equity work on what they're doing, what the co-op is doing, on what Next Stage is doing in relation to DEI, on relation to what the general store is doing. The school committee could come and present, and just having places where those presentations could happen, as well as possibly discussions and crosswork between different organizations that would be hosted at an equity inclusion committee.
And
let's specifically talk about economic needs for children, and the co-op comes and Next Stage comes and the school comes, and we have a 2-hour conversation about what Putney wants to do around that and what the organizations are doing.
And then all of that can get brought to the select board if there's things that need to come from it, and then it gets decided on. Got it.
This is clear in the wording, but not necessarily. This is facilitating interactions between those groups, not facilitating interactions between individuals and those groups. So it's not. It's sort of a different category. It's to try and help encourage all the different groups that are already doing this kind of work to work together, because there's no point in.
And I'm all for that.
Yeah.
And I'm just being a little picky because we weren't picky enough in the beginning of this whole process.
Yep.
And so I'm being a little picky to make sure that we're all on the same page and everybody knows their definition. I can't find a better word.
That's good.
That's what
do you feel comfortable sticking with that language, knowing what we mean by facilitate?
If we change the language in 9, I am, and then understanding what the assessment tool is. I'd like to read the example from the state, and then just to get an idea, even though I know we'd be creating your own. And then that's it. That's what I had highlighted. So thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate your specificity. I had a few specific things too, and Eileen, I wanted to let you go first.
Okay.
Thank you.
I did contact Swift last weekend, I think. And the one thing that I shared a concern about is the last piece, which makes sense to have this as a policy in general for all of our committees and commissions. I feel a little wary of putting it into this charge in particular. It feels like we're singling this particular committee out.
You mean the requirement to have a prospective member
Yeah,
submit a letter of
that's-
interest, be recommended by the committee?
That's something
Well-
we should be doing anyway, I would say.
Well,
So,
we really do. We
Right.
just haven't formalized it, so we shouldn't.
I was maybe taking it out of here and having a separate policy about committees in general, how we.
Yes, I agree with you, and/or we could do that. I mean, we could just make, I don't know whether we have a policy about.
I don't, well, it's not.
We don't, but I think by statute.
I don't think there's
No.
anything in statute
I don't
about
think so either.
about,
No.
because they're all at will.
I mean, what's that?
I asked Howard, because he
Karen asked
knows
me.
statutes.
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking.
So we have in the last sentence in this is a sentence.
Does Howard have a copy of this?
I do.
Okay, great.
A prospective member must submit a letter of interest, be recommended by the committee, and be publicly interviewed by the select board of the town of Putney and interested members of the public. So we generally do that as a
Yes,
practice, but it's
yeah.
very informal. I mean, Susan,
Yeah,
that was a good
right.
example tonight. Geordie was here to advocate. I mean, that's
Right.
different because it's appointment of an official, not just a committee. But hang on one second. But we tend to do. I mean, and almost exclusively, if there's a member of an interested member for the Conservation Commission, they have to write a letter and typically comes to a meeting and says, we want you to do this. But I agree with you. We don't want to signal it. We don't want it to appear or be a hurdle
Right.
specific to this committee that is not present for other committees. So, but I think the question for you, Mr. Fairman, was there is nothing, I don't think, and I would agree with Eileen on this, statutorily that would require us to do this. So if we were to require this, that would have to be something we would have to adopt. Yeah.
As always, Mr. Chairman, I am not an attorney, but to my knowledge, Vermont statutes are silent on this subject.
That's what I believe.
However, once you have completed your discussion, I shall be offering some comments as well, one of which addresses that matter.
Okay, sounds good. So it's a good point. I don't know. We should probably come up with a policy that wouldn't have to be a whole lot more than this sentence, exactly, for the purpose of appointments to town committees.
To apply to all committees.
To-
It's not
and-
specific to this.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So why don't we? So do we want to leave this in here because it will be part of another policy, or do we want to take it out of here?
Would it be better to do it separately first so it doesn't appear first as part of this policy?
Or do them at the same time?
Or
That this essentially created the discussion in which we decided that this was a necessary part of any committee, which I think it should be.
Yeah.
So,
I like that.
all right.
How do we do that?
We
Well,
propose it for our next meeting.
Yeah,
I
we
think.
have to, as an agenda item, but.
I have a little language in there that I think should be edited, just for clarity, and adding the language there of interviewed in open meeting by the select board.
Yeah.
For this piece of, you could interview them not in open meeting.
Oh.
That is-
Well, it says publicly interviewed, so we'll change it from publicly
Or
to
maybe, yeah,
interviewed
there we go.
in open session.
Great.
I actually
and
have that
then-
in mind. Isn't that? Somebody did that. An open meeting.
Oh, maybe Swift added that before you go.
So I did some edits. The edits that I did may have somehow gotten in there. So I guess I'm just saying it publicly because I think the one that I shared beforehand maybe wasn't in there. So adding interviewed in public meeting, and then the last sentence that I think might be on the copy you're looking at, David, is by the select board at the very end. Being appointed by the select board.
Before being appointed.
I mean,
Yep, exactly. Yep.
That's clear, but
Yeah.
and is there any more discussion on that piece? Because I had a few other pieces that I think actually might be in the copy you have, but
Go ahead, Swift.
so the other two pieces are, if you go to number 2, Just changing the language here just a little bit. So it says to decide upon recommendations of the select board regarding measures that will address and challenge instances of inequity, such as racial diversity, which isn't an issue of inequity. So taking out diversity and saying racial and economic disparities instead of inequity. So just making that a little more clear, because racial diversity is not an issue of inequity. It's not an example of an issue of inequity.
Yeah.
So
These are her changes.
So, and I think that that might already be in David's. And I'm editing that, and I'll make sure to get that to Alyssa. So challenge instances of inequity, such as racial and economic disparities. The other piece is in number 4, where we say implicit bias training, to institute ongoing implicit bias training. I took out implicit bias training and just said training programs for attendance, because implicit bias training is a very specific type of training. There's all sorts of trainings involved in DEI work, around diversity training, around any and all above. So this piece of just recognizing implicit bias training is something very specific and going a little more broadly.
Sounds good. That's basically, the second sentence in there, it sort of implies that. But yes, I think we take out implicit bias is good. I agree with you. I think that makes sense.
Okay, that was it. And I think I've got all our edits on here with the other things you mentioned, David, and
So if we don't have anything else from within the board or from SWIFT or other members of the committee, then Mr. Furman.
I know Mark is here. I don't know if Mark just got here. I don't know if Mark wants to say anything or.
Hi, Mark.
You good, Mark?
We're just sort of finishing up working on. It's mostly just tweaks to language. A lot, some of which is the stuff that SWIFT already changed, but a couple changes to wording. You got anything to add?
No, I just really hope that we're able to move forward and, so that we know exactly, so that we can get started. So, and it's good to see everybody. Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
All right. So, Mr. Fairman, you had some questions or some comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is a letter from me to the Town of Putney Select Board, which I have submitted to Elisa for distribution, so it is now a public document. As you will hear, I have considered at length and in depth the draft, and I shall take no longer than is necessary. With reference to the draft Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee purpose and charge that was made public during the June 16, 2021 regular meeting of our Select Board, I support equity and inclusion, about which a Vermont municipality has limited jurisdiction, powers, and functions, as I shall explain. This draft refers to the Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee as if they were a civic organization. Appointed by our Town of Putney Select Board, they are the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee, an advisory committee to our Municipal Select Board. Some of the committee's charge fulfills the committee's stated purpose. The rest of the committee's charge exceeds the committee's purpose and the Town of Putney's municipal jurisdiction, powers, and functions. Vermont is a Dillon's rule state where, quoting the Vermont Supreme Court in City of Montpelier versus Barnett, a municipality has only those powers and functions specifically authorized by the legislature, and such additional functions as may be incident, subordinate, or necessary to the exercise thereof. If any fair, reasonable, substantial doubt exists concerning a grant of power, it must be resolved against the municipality and its power denied, unquote. Vermont statutes specifically authorize powers and functions of 36 municipal offices. Member of the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee is not a municipal office having powers and functions specifically authorized by the Vermont General Assembly via Vermont statutes. Per Dillon's rule, appointed members of the Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee therefore have no municipal powers and functions. This committee therefore is advisory, as are appointed municipal committees in general. Incorrectly listed in the 2020 Putney Town Report as appointed officials, members of these committees should be listed as appointed advisors to the Select Board. Purpose. The purpose of the Equity and Inclusion Committee is to identify and advise the Select Board about inequities and to encourage inclusive practices in town services, programs, human resource practices, and decision-making processes. Charge. 1. To decide upon recommendations to the Select Board regarding communication practices that will promote greater accessibility to town-related information to all stakeholders. What evidence is there that town-related information is not accessible to all stakeholders? 2. To decide upon recommendations to the Select Board regarding measures that will address and challenge instances of inequity, such as racial diversity and economic inequity. What role can and should the Town of Putney as a municipal government adopt and play in addressing and challenging economic inequity? 3. To compile information regarding equity and inclusion locally and in the state of Vermont, and to identify and compile resources available regarding the foregoing for advising both the public and the Select Board. Why would a Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee identify and compile resources regarding equity and inclusion in the state of Vermont that is subject to jurisdiction, powers, and functions of other municipalities, county and state governments, and civic and political organizations statewide? 6. To create an equity impact assessment tool to assist in reviews of policy and procedures. Presumably one refers to a checklist, which should be so named, because a tool, some means to an end, is too vague to be clearly understood, evaluated, nor applied. 8. To review extant and future contract service providers, i.e. Windham County Sheriff's Office, policies, and assess their alignment with this committee's recommendations to the Select Board. The committee are asserting jurisdiction over businesses, professional practices, and an elected county office over which they have no jurisdiction, powers, nor authority. 9. To provide resources and advocacy for confronting bias-motivated incidents is not advisory. Provide resources and advocacy is governing without municipal powers and functions specifically authorized per Dillon's rule by the Vermont General Assembly via Vermont statutes. The committee could identify resources and advocacy for our Select Board. 12. To facilitate interactions between all Putney organizations and businesses regarding their work on equity, inclusion, and diversity. Per Dillon's rule, the Town of Putney has no jurisdiction, powers, nor authority over all Putney organizations and businesses regarding their work on equity, inclusion, and diversity. Membership consists of up to 9 members appointed by the Select Board of the Town of Putney, with a minimum of 2/3 of the committee always being Putney residents. Non-resident members of the Town of Putney Advisory Committee are consultants. Participating in approval of their advice and adoption of their recommendations is a conflict of interest, resolved by their not being members of the committee. A prospective member must be recognized by the committee, authorizes the committee to handpick their members. Only the Town of Putney Select Board can decide who among all interested citizens who need no third-party recommendation may join an appointed town committee. The original Town of Putney Equity and Inclusion Committee immediately adopted rules of procedure, which are means to the end of applying powers and functions that a municipal advisory committee cannot have. A municipal advisory committee's rules of procedure are limited to the obligatory Vermont Open Meeting Law and standard rules of order. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. It sounds like we should probably spend some time sort of reconciling some of the information that you have highlighted. I mean, I think that, and I don't think you're arguing against this, that the intent and what this committee is proposing to do is sort of reasonably closely aligned with what you're saying they need to do, but I think that having the language state that clearly is important. So if we can maybe, Swift, at our next meeting, we can have a copy of Mr. Fairman's concerns and look at them and see how we can reconcile. Does that make sense?
Sure. I think, yeah, and thank you so much for taking the time to look at that, Mr. Fairman. I think the piece that for me that rings the loudest in this is that what Mr. Fairman is referencing feels like it's decades old histories and rules of how this has always been done. And we are, as people, changing these systems right now in Vermont, in the country, all over, of how do we do this differently, because it hasn't necessarily been working for everybody out there. And I think that the Equity and Inclusion Committee is a big part of that, and it does look different, and it does, like, how do we fit it in the system that we have and still ignite change? So yeah, I think we should definitely look at some of these concerns at our next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I agree with you that some of that potentially sort of refers to a system that we would be hoping to change, but since it is the existing system, we
Right.
need to function
we have
within
to
it.
create that change within the system that
Yeah.
is. Right.
So, but
For the record, though, my read of this particular charge makes it very clear that this is an advisory committee only.
Yes.
I don't see most of the concerns that Mr. Fairman came up with being inherent in this charge. And the fact is that all committees are advisory only by statute. So I don't have the same concern that that this might be misread.
My only concern is that when the first committee was formed, the communication between us and the committee was not clear. And I think the work we're doing right now around the language to get that clear is really important.
and helpful.
And really
Yeah.
helpful. So I think it's going to take these things, and I'm grateful for you raising your concerns, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I think we need to look at that.
And something, you know, as seemingly simple as to create an equity and impact assessment checklist as opposed to a tool.
Right.
That's just a different use of language. Again, essentially the intent, I think, is the same, but it makes sense.
It may be more interactive than a checklist, though. It may be
Could-
an actual tool,
could be.
an online
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah, that's true. So.
And that's the language the state uses, and that's the language I think the country uses of what this thing is called. That's a wide thing that's new to us, but that's the title of what these sort of tools for creating these filters around decision making and around new actions and policies are called. They're called a tool, because it might be that there's an interview involved in there. It might be that there's a phone call involved in there. It might be that there's a checklist of 10 things as well, but it is a little more broad than that.
Yeah, I believe
And ours will be more simple. I think that's important what you said, that ours will likely be more simple.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I am responding to a comment made by, I believe, a member of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, to which, as a veteran activist, I would say, well played. But the town of Putney is in no way able to operate outside the system, because Vermont is a Dillon's rule state, where unless the statute says you can do it, you can't do it. And the reason I cited the Vermont Supreme Court and the City of Montpelier versus Barnett is because paragraph 20 of, I think it's about a 30-page decision, is an excellent historical review of Dillon's rule. Now, as the Supreme Court said, if any fair, reasonable, substantial doubt exists concerning a grant of power, it must be resolved against the municipality and its power denied. This is where you are at, and this is where you will remain until the Vermont Supreme Court rules differently.
Right. Changes that. Exactly.
So in that regard, it isn't a question of we've always done it this way. It is a question of this is the way we do it because we are a Dillon's rule state. It's as simple, it is as simple as that. So the reason I established the argument of what an advisory, of what a committee is, and that all committees are advisory, is because this has been a matter of controversy in this town, which is how we got into the situation with the First Amendment that led us to where we are today. And it's also been an issue in other towns around the state. But this is simply the way it is, and we have to operate within this context.
So, and that's what I think that's what we'll look at our next meeting, is to sort of reasonably reconcile that and see what makes sense and doesn't make sense. And I think it's, again, I think the intent is correct. It's a matter of having the language reflected in a way that does not go beyond what you're stating. You had a question or comment?
I was going to make a comment. I think one of the big things to think about is recognizing that if Vermont is currently a Dillon's law state, does that mean it doesn't have to be that way in the future? Like, is that something that can be adjusted? I know the state is also having a task force that is working on these exact issues. So, though the Vermont Supreme Court has ruled on it previously, is there a new precedent, and or is there going to be a new precedent set by that task force and or through the court system as of recent changes? So those are new things to look at. I recognize the historic standpoint, however, history doesn't have to mean the future.
Right, but I think we don't necessarily want to be the ones ending up in Supreme Court to try and prove that. So.
And until it changes, Howard's point is good. We have to function under those rules until those rules change.
Unless they are strictly wrong, and we really do want to take that stance, but we'd have to be pretty clear about it.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I realize and acknowledge that the gentleman who just spoke may not be that familiar with Dillon's rule. Dillon was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state of Iowa. His decision was rendered shortly after the Civil War and was affirmed by the Supreme Court of the United States in 1903. Most states are Dillon's rule states, but not all are. For example, New Hampshire is, Massachusetts isn't. It is a home rule state. Connecticut, on the other hand, is both, and New York is in both, and some counties in New York have county governments with legislatures, and so it gets even more complicated. But Vermont is a Dillon's rule state, and to address the question he implicitly raised of how would it switch to something else, the answer is Vermont would have to decide legislatively. I don't believe constitutionally, I'm not sure about that, but we'll have to decide legislatively that we are now a home rule state. That is what would have to happen. Because, or alternatively, as I mentioned, like Connecticut or New York, we can be home rule at some levels and Dillon's rule at other levels. But one way of explaining it, and this is the way a former Vermont Secretary of State explained it to me years ago.
He had chapter fast. Sorry to interrupt.
Zoom land.
Sorry, go ahead.
As a former Vermont Secretary of State explained it to me years ago, I go way back on this. In Vermont, towns are creatures of the state.
Right. Makes sense.
You are doubtless aware that some towns have charters granted by the legislature. Right. Brattleboro is one of them.
Yeah.
Springfield is another. But those charters are granted and modified by the legislature. So if you want to change your town charter, you have to get the Vermont General Assembly to do it.
To agree to
which means that you have to win a majority in both the House and the Senate. And we had an example of this in the latest legislative session, where the charters of the cities of Winooski and Montpelier, by the way, all cities have charters, were amended to allow non-citizens to vote on town matters in local elections, but not in school matters. So perhaps I've indicated that although this may sound confusing, the reason is because it is.
Right, and then I guess the argument would be, yes, and I go back, we don't need to We don't.
We can talk about that for a really long
Yeah,
time.
exactly. But the argument being that if somebody were to want enough to test that limit and the limits of that, sort of where does that take you and how do you push it and so on and so forth. But as you accurately point out, at this time, it is what it is. So we stick with it until Swift is ready to decide to, petition the legislature to change to
I love that you said that. I was going to say that. I was like, well, you folks might not want to go to the Supreme Court, but I will. Yeah. I'm like, okay, sure. So, I was going to say that. And then I also wanted to say, just Mr. Fairman, this piece of, I reference, and I don't know certainly not as well as you, that there are guidelines and restrictions that are holding some of the systems in place. And I'm not saying that we go against them at this time, but I'm saying this piece of how do we work within the system we do have and really create a safer, more equitable space for Putney. And I want to move towards that being the priority versus fitting in the boxes being the priority, and how can we do both and not make too many waves and still serve the public.
Right, and how to accomplish what we, the committee and or the town, wants to accomplish without going outside of those limitations in order to create problems for ourselves. And is that always possible? No, but for the time being, that's certainly what we try and do.
And we can at least be intelligent about how we go about that and put our energies in the best place possible.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But thank you, Mr. Chairman. A well-stated argument, as usual, and we will definitely take it into consideration. So I think what we should plan on doing is having the committee revisit these edits, as well as looking at Mr. Fairman's information and seeing whether there are specifics that we can alter in order to adapt to that, and then resubmitting. Does that sound fair?
Yep, and then I just wanted to publicly say our next meeting. So our next meeting is at 12:15 to 1:45 this Friday, so July 2nd, and that will be warned officially with an agenda that will have what Josh just said on it and a Zoom link. And it will not be in person, it will only be on Zoom. Let me just double check that. Yeah, 12:15 to 1:45 on Friday.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
Because open meeting law is now in effect in any boards and commissions. You can't have all remote access.
We have to have an in-person presence, Swift, so we'll have to, at least some of us will have to meet somewhere.
Town hall is open.
So why don't we have it at town hall? I can probably be there.
So just one person has to be at town hall? Is that enough?
Yes.
Or
there has to be a presence. Yeah.
And we don't have the technology, so someone would have to use their laptop.
I can use my laptop and be present at that.
Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't realize that. So now, but you're open to do that, and so anyone that wanted to join in person could join you at town hall.
Exactly.
At 12:15 on Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Just to clarify, since it came up, the open meeting law does not actually require that a member of the select board be present. Recall the June 16th meeting.
Right.
Claire and I were Claire Wilson and I were at the town office.
Yes.
And the town clerk was there to set it up for us with a laptop. You all were remotely.
Yes.
What the open meeting law actually says is that there must be a place for the public to attend the meeting.
Can assemble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So I guess that's an important clarification. I guess what I wasn't offering that I would be willing to be there as a select board member.
Right.
I would be willing to be there as a committee member, and I can offer that as for the purpose that you're stating, which is right, which is to allow public access to it. So.
And the reason, Mr. Chairman, is simply the Vermont open meeting law does not allow meeting of the public body to be accessible only to people who can get to it via the internet.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense. And of course, we've all gotten used to that for a while, but
we have.
But now we need to go back. So, all right, good. Any more on equity and inclusion for this meeting? Okay, I know I have an
Just
agenda here.
gratitude and thank you all for sticking with it and prioritizing it. And thank you.
And thank you. All right. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Swift.
Thank you.
Okay, so American Rescue Plan Act, Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Funding.
So in your packets, you have the document from Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And in there is the form. If we are to request the funds, there is a process. And I will let you know that Putney will be receiving $128,557 in 2021. And then in 2022, we will receive a second payment of $128,557. In a meeting that we had a couple weeks back, maybe a month back, I had given you a flyer that states what these funds could be used for.
Right.
So replace public sector revenue loss, water and sewer infrastructure improvements, equity-focused services, address negative economic impacts, premium pay for essential workers, broadband infrastructure. In order, we have to request the money.
Right.
So I'm here with this, and we have to do it by July 15th.
Do I hear a motion
Yes.
to approve the request for money?
So
So moved.
in
I'll second.
this document, you have 3 motions
Oh,
that you're
okay.
gonna need to make. So not only do we request the money, we need to designate a person that,
2 people, actually, right? A person.
well, it doesn't.
A contact and a,
Well, yeah, a representative to do the, the paperwork,
Can
and
those
then,
can those people be the same?
I've seen it, I checked out Dummerston and Westminster. So I know the Westminster town manager is both, and, the treasurer in Dummerston, because they're a little different anyway, because they don't have a town manager.
So,
So my
there's-
recommendation is that if any one of you want to do the work, then please put your name down. I'm in the office 5 days a week. So.
yes, I think that would, can this be all done as a single motion, or do we need this to be?
I did see the 2 different, their draft language for motions.
Yeah, I would do all 3 as separate ones,
So I'll just
Josh.
read
Okay.
this with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eileen, what, you want to read this?
Yeah, we can split it up.
Okay.
All right, I move that the town of Putney accept its allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding from the U.S. Treasury, along with the award terms and conditions and assurances of compliance with the civil rights requirements that are requirements of accepting these funds.
And I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to,
So,
to move that it's been moved and seconded that the town of Putney accept its allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding from the U.S. Treasury, along with the award terms and conditions and assurances of compliance with the civil rights requirements that are requirements of accepting these funds. And it's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
And what are the hoops we have to jump through?
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
what
do we have
are
to do
the
to
award
make them
terms and
happy?
conditions?
Right, exactly.
yeah, I'm just gonna fill it out tomorrow, that way
Okay.
we're in compliance. And I don't know when the first payment's gonna come. And there are criteria too.
I'm wondering, because whenever I read anything that says you do not need to know how to spend, you'll spend your allocation yet, but you must do these 3 things in order to prepare for the request. I get nervous when I
These are
read stuff like this.
federal funds.
Here, we'll give you a credit card.
These are federal funds, so there's a whole process,
Yeah,
like
no doubt.
sam.gov,
Right.
I gotta track it, electronically, it's, but it'll be worth it.
But it's a chunk of money,
It
as
is a
long as it
chunk.
doesn't
Right.
create more work than it's
Right.
worth, and that falls on you.
All federal grants are like that.
Okay.
There's
Well,
a lot
I
of legwork to them.
Yeah.
and a lot of compliance.
So but it mostly falls on you, so I'm asking you.
I'll be fine because
Okay, all right.
I have
All right.
Alyssa, so.
Mr.
Do you
Chairman,
hear that, Alyssa?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
first a comment and then a question. Your colleague just said that this may be more work than it's worth. That's $256,000, which is worth all the work it takes to get it.
That's a good
From
point,
the
Mr.
perspective
Fairman.
of town of Putney's taxpayers.
Yes.
That's a good point.
My question, because it hasn't come up, is do we have to state in the application for what we wish to use the money, or can we decide that later?
We can decide that later.
Thank you.
That was the piece I just read, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. So on motion number one, yes, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
All right, you too.
Yeah.
I move that we appoint
Karen Astley.
Karen Astley to serve as the town of Putney's authorized representative as required by the coronavirus local fiscal recovery funding from the U.S. Treasury to sign the award terms and conditions and assurances of compliances with the civil rights requirements by
July 15th.
July 15th.
July 15th.
July
yes.
15th, 2021.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to appoint Karen to serve as our authorized representative as required for CLFRF funding from the U.S. Treasury. Is there any discussion related to that? Seeing as how there's no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So before Eileen makes this motion, Alyssa,
Do you want?
contact
Well,
person, or you the contact person also?
It's hard if we split it up.
Okay, so you want to be,
Yeah.
you want all the punishment.
Well, the Summer Matters grant that we just
Yeah,
got from
yeah.
the federal government, right? Same thing. So we have 4 different people. Emily was getting all of it. I'm like the main person.
Right.
And it's just confusing.
Got it.
And you don't
Comes
want,
to you
and that's how
too.
you miss a date.
Probably not
Yes.
easy to change it
Yes.
afterwards either, right?
What was that? Eileen?
Probably not easy to change it afterwards either. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, no, it would be
I
okay.
think they'd be okay with
Yeah.
changing the contact person.
Yeah.
All right. I move that we name Karen Astley to be the contact person for the town of Putney's CLRFR award from the U.S. Treasury.
And I second that.
Been moved and seconded that we name Karen Astley to be the contact person for the town of Putney's CLRFR award from the U.S. Treasury. Is there any discussion? Seeing as how there's none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. Thank you, and thank you for staying on top of this.
Yes.
And,
Thank you for doing it, Karen.
as-
Thank you for doing
You're
it.
welcome.
As Chief Fairman pointed out, and I think we all realize, it's a chunk of change, so we'll
Thank
be
you.
able to figure out something to do with it, I'm sure.
Right. And let's get wine here.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, so next on our is new highway department loader purchase review and recommendation.
Okay, so in your packet, there are 4 quotes,
Yep.
but we're gonna eliminate 2 right off the bat.
Yep.
Okay, so we wanna pay attention to the Caterpillar 930M wheel loader. And we also wanna pay attention to the John Deere 544 P wheels. Those are the 2 ones that we're gonna be.
Those are and those are comparable size.
Yes.
That's why we're considering
Yeah,
this. 'cause
the
those
other
both
2
fall
are
in.
bigger machines.
Yeah.
And they're
And-
nice machines, but
They're nice
pricey.
machines, but we did test machines and the highway department, the crew, were satisfied with the smaller model, okay? So,
And is what we have right now about the same size?
That's a good
The
question.
Kawasaki is slightly bigger than the 544.
yeah,
But the truth is, because this is a newer and better made machine,
right.
it will actually
It can
do the
more work.
perform. It'll be
The
perform
performance
better.
will be,
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
right.
And it's, you know, the Kawasaki is basically a defunct company now. It was bought by Hitachi, and
Right.
it's hard to get parts. And anyway,
It's ready to go.
right.
Yeah, so both of these dealers are in Vermont, and you know, the service would be quicker. So as far as the cat goes, at the bottom of the page, so $185,000 is the discounted cost. With a $40,000 trade-in would bring the net trade to $145,000. So at town meeting, it was voted on $165,000, okay? The John Deere is at a price of $172,000. And the trade-in value on that is $35,000, which the balance due would be $137.
$137,000.
$137,000, sorry.
That would be really good.
Brian,
We'd buy
love
two.
that. You would definitely wait for that.
We
right?
might buy three.
Yeah.
Right.
Still in the same fiscal year. So when he tested both of these, the consensus was the Milton cat, and that is his recommendation to this board. Even though the trade, the trade's better on the cat than it is on the John Deere, but the John Deere is at a lower price than the cat. The cat is in stock. The John Deere we would not be able to take possession of it until like December.
December, that's what he
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
So it's a difference of, if we look at just cost, it's a $13,000 difference, but we end up with a $5,000 better trade. for cat.
13,000, no, 8,000.
Well,
isn't it?
eventually, you're right.
Eventually,
The actual,
it'd be
the cost before
$8,000
trade-in is
difference
13, yeah.
between the cat
Oh, I see what you're saying.
and the John Deere.
Because of the trading value.
Correct.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So the fact the cat is in stock, it's a heavier loader than the John Deere. It's more solid, and it's a better machine overall for performance.
Or at least it's
Right,
his preference for
correct.
performance. Yeah.
So,
No, and I mean, if we were considering a no-name that seemed like the better deal, as we have done once in the past with a grader versus a known name,
right,
then I would say maybe not so much. But given, with a cat, we're going to get our money's worth, no question about it. So, I think either of these probably would be very adequate, but if it's the preference and the timing is right to take the cat, that certainly makes sense.
I totally agree with that. Brian came by the shop today and talked for a few minutes about it because he wanted to let me know what his feelings were. And he said the real deciding factor for him was that when he test drove the John Deere, he was not impressed with it. He wasn't impressed with the hydraulics. He wasn't impressed with the way it handled and the way it felt. He felt like it wasn't made as well as the ones in the past that he's used before. And one of the concerns he had was, if you get a truck stuck in the winter, one of the road trucks, the loader is what you use to get it unstuck.
right.
And this loader is slightly heavier. The bucket is a quarter of a yard bigger. That's nice for loading. And he just driving it, he just felt like it was a much better machine. And he made one other point. The road service mechanic for Caterpillar lives on Beebe Road.
Really?
Here in Westminster West.
Oh, okay.
And so he comes home by Brian's house every night. So if there's anything we need, that's just one of those things on the side that's just, drop off that, case of filters we need for whatever. And that would be wonderful. So and he knows him. I forgot his name. Do you know his name?
I don't.
I forgot his name. He told me his name today, and I got it written down on the note on my desk at home. But
I would think the one other consideration, and again, this would be different if we were going with something that was a lesser known name, but trade-in value, the trade-in value on a cat is going to stay as strong as trade-in on anything could possibly stay. So
he mentioned that too. He said the trade-in on the John Deere, in 5,000 hours in 10 years would be, I don't know, $40,000-$50,000, but on the cat, it's going to be $60,000-$70,000.
Right.
So even though we're paying an extra, $8 right now?
Right.
Between the two?
Yes.
It's a little heavier, it's a little bigger, it's better
Mhm.
made, and we're gonna get better trading value
Right.
plus. So I think it's a go.
Right.
So
And it's less than what people approved.
do I hear you formulating a motion in your head
The motion is to approve the purchase of the CAT 930 loader
as per recommendation
as
of?
per Brian Harlow, our road foreman.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to accept the recommendation of Brian Harlow and approve the purchase of the CAT 930.
930, what's a miss, 930, not 938.
Loader.
9:30,
Is there any further discussion? Seeing as there's none, all those in favor? Say
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye, thank you. And thanks to Brian and
Yes.
to Kat and to Nortrax also for putting the
Right.
work in to
There's just one
put a quote together for us.
comment on the side, and that he said they were just waiting for the tires. There were some tires that needed to go on that CAT or something. They were putting it in. Then
Yeah,
they
they're
can take delivery.
expecting delivery like maybe by August.
Right, so, yeah.
All right, next on our contract renewal, Windham County Sheriff's Office.
So in front of you is the contract for the next fiscal year, July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022. There is no change. We knew that during budget season. So $82,000 that will remain.
But that number's not specifically in this contract, but I'm assuming we put it on that during.
No, but we do refer back to the original contract, and that language is here. Now, we do have, like November 1st, 2021, we can change our minds if we choose to do that. The select board can choose.
Tell me about that. Remind me how that works.
We have to write them a letter,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, you could change your hours.
Mm-hmm. Because we had talked about that at one point. That was part of the discussion last year, wasn't it? Remind me, Josh. We had talked about, but we felt because of the rate increase with the decreased hours, it really wasn't that much of a savings.
That's the thing is, you know,
right.
if you
Right.
if you go for the lesser contract, you pay a higher hourly rate.
Correct.
And yes, it saves some money, but relatively less. We've also always leaned on the sheriff, whoever that might be at the time, to guide us in thinking about what we need.
Well, and that's a good point, Josh.
Because I don't.
Community policing, what does it look like in Putney?
Yeah, and I think that
The area.
Sheriff Henderson is clear. Well, I mean, the last time I brought that question up with him, which I can't remember when that was, he said, I think this is about what you need.
Right.
I mean, I think that we could probably do less, but we'd get less if we did less, and that probably isn't in our best interest. I mean, the difference, I want to say the difference between this contract, it was 82 or 52 for half the number of hours.
It wasn't half as much, and that's what we leaned against away from it because of that. Because if it was 82 and 41,
then
that was
it would
different.
be worth thinking
Right,
about.
exactly.
Right.
But again, and we have to trust that the sheriff is going to guide us correctly in saying, if and they certainly have said in the past, well, you could probably get away with this, but you might want to think about that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we sit with that.
And we have them at a meeting every year.
Okay.
To speak to the board.
All right.
So.
All right.
Okay.
Motion.
So motion to approve the contract for law enforcement services in the Windham County Sheriff's Department.
I'll second.
So in the amount of $82,000 for the period from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022.
Mhm.
So it has been moved and seconded to approve the contract for law enforcement services as presented. Is there any discussion? Tom, since you're here, I'll just, got any comment on how it's been? Works pretty well, doesn't it? Okay, staying with it. Okay. Pros and cons. All right. Sorry to put you on the spot. It's been moved and seconded to accept the contract for law enforcement services as presented. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So contract renewal with the Windham County Humane Society.
So again, in your packet is the contract for animal holding per state statute 20 V.S.A. 3381. This contract did not change in its fee, so it will be $786 to have an impounded facility for the town of Putney.
And that's hopefully in combination with a potential animal control officer, something we might be able to
where are we with
take
that?
advantage of.
The contract is with the attorney on the sheriff's side.
Okay.
So once that gets vetted, then we'll see something, but he plans on starting July 1st.
Good.
Cool.
Oh, okay.
So
very
they
soon.
got enough towns, they got the commitment, they have the officer.
Yeah.
And now we're just waiting for
And
them.
now we'll have the
And this is another thing, a program that's a regionally shared animal control officer where other towns, if it works for us, other towns
Are
will
likely to
join.
jump in, it'll get
And
less
the fee will
expensive.
be less.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
That's optimistic.
yes.
Well, yes, optimistic, but I have a hard time imagining it could be less functional than it has been. Because it hasn't been functional.
And that's nothing against anybody who's tried to make it functional. That's
Definitely not.
But just as a reminder to the board that the animal control officer will only be doing certain things.
Right, yes.
So they're not gonna respond to
Barking
a barking
dogs.
dog.
Yeah.
Well, we should get, have that list and put that out there somehow so that whatever people's expectations are realistic. Don't you think? Is that something we could do?
I put it out there
Oh,
on
did you?
Facebook.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Okay, good.
And I'll post something on iPenny. Yeah, so basically it's non-registered dogs, licensed or non-rabies.
Mm-hmm.
They will go after people for that. Vicious animals,
Mm-hmm.
animal cruelty, and
Neglecting.
I think there was one more. I just can't remember it off the top of my head. So, yeah, I think that's gonna help a lot. And, the biggest thing too with this new animal control officer, she will be educating.
Is she, we know who she is?
Yes.
Good,
Yes.
great.
Nice.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
perhaps the missing item on Town Manager Ashley's list is animals that are running loose and no one knows who the owner is.
That is it.
Huh?
Animals running at large.
I
Thank you,
thought
Mr.
it might
Fairman.
be. That's the problem, actually, this morning I'm walking along, a lady stopped, she says, have you seen my dog? I said, I haven't seen any dog, but that's the situation that people get into.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And if I had seen the dog, but the owner didn't come along, what do I do?
What do you do?
Right.
That's the answer.
Yeah. Good. All right, so motion to accept the Windham County Humane Society contract.
Yep. Yeah, so moved.
second.
Been moved and seconded to accept the Windham County Humane Society contract in the amount of, it's not right on there,
$786.
It's in the it's in.
Yeah, no,
it's at the very bottom.
Yeah. For July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? No, and I believe we are going to enter executive session, correct?
We are.
Okay, so, would somebody like to make a motion to enter executive session?
Make a motion to enter executive session under Title I V.S.A. 313(3).
A3 and also,
A3, thank you.
Oh, there's two different
there's
ones.
two.
Oh, I'm sorry. And Title I V.S.A. 313(A1), A1.
I'll second.
Okay, and we will invite Karen Astley to join us, and we will invite Tom Goddard to join us.
Yes.
And are we likely to make any decisions tonight?
Maybe on the second one.
Okay. So if we make any decisions, Austin, Karen will notify you, but I don't think it's anything that you need to stay to record. So, okay, it's been moved and seconded to enter executive session and invite Karen and Tom to join us. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.